All rise. We will obey. The International Criminal Court is now in session. The Denzil Court Penal International, 8 to word. Please be seated. Point versus one.
Thank you very much. Court officer, please call the case.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Officer, thank you, Mr. President. Situation in the Republic of Kenya in the case the prosecutor versus William Samuel Ruto and Joshua Arabsang, ICC 01090111. We are in open session.
Thank you. Appearances.
Good morning, Your Honours. For the prosecution, appearance is the same as yesterday.
Thank you. Mr. Naratsatse.
Good morning, Mr. President, Your Honours. The victims are represented by myself, Ocean Naratsatse, and James Mavira, my colleague. Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honours. Mr. Sang's team remains the same.
Good morning, Mr. President, Your Honours. Mr. Ruto's defence team remains the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fowler will continue his cross-examination of witness. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us again. Before we do, counsel, we will communicate with you by email about the possibility of a status conference that will be done in the course of the day. Thank you. Please, Mr. Fowler, continue.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Mr. Bromley.
Good morning, sir.
Welcome back. I hope you're well rested.
Yes, thank you.
Yesterday, just before the close of day, we started talking about Kiamba. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
I would wish to take a step backwards to help us first understand the work you have done with regards to Kiamba and also to help us understand the material. I take it that you have analyzed the imagery with respect to the area that is known as Kiamba and have annotated that segment of the imagery for the purposes of your report. Is that right?
That is correct.
And am I correct to say that the imagery was divided into grid cells and each grid cell was given a number? Is that right?
Not precisely. The grid cells were developed for the Atlas book product, but the analysis proceeded in basically a grid-like fashion. So each segment of the image was analyzed in turn until the entire image was analyzed.
Thank you for that correction. And in the analysis, each of those grid cells in the atlas was magnified, and your findings are annotated on that segment. Is that right?
That is correct.
And as per the instructions you received from the Office of the Prosecutor, you looked specifically at places known as Huruma, Kimumu, Langas, Yamumbi, and Kiamba. Is that right?
Yes, I received coordinates for those locations and then essentially analyzed the area around those coordinates and including those coordinates.
So in order for us to see exactly the results that you were able to arrive at with regards to these particular places, we have to go back to those actual grid cells that coincide with those particular locations. Say, for instance, we have to go to the grid cell that is, say, for Kiamba. Is that right?
Somewhat. The grid cells you might be referring to, if they're the grid cells represented in the atlas, they are not exactly the grid cells that were used to guide the analysis.
Could you explain that again? I am a bit lost as to what you were trying to say here. My understanding is that you have the imagery, you divided it into grid cells, and then you identify the locations of interest. And those locations of interest coincided with particular grid cells. And in order to know what happened or your findings with regards to those locations, we have to go to the grid cells that corresponded with it. Is that right?
Are you referring to the grid cells represented in the atlas product?
Yes.
So no, the analysis did not use those grid cells. The grid cells were created for the atlas product simply as a way to create a 100-page book for these images. And so the OTP could use that book to refer to specific areas as needed. When I analyzed the image, I had a certain image extent, which I then just reviewed sequentially piece by piece, but it did not necessarily relate to the grid cells specifically, though at the end of the process both refer to the same areas.
What I'm trying to drive at here, Mr. Bromley, is that if we want to find out what are the results of your findings, say with regards to a place called Huruma, how do we use the results of your analysis together with the atlas to determine exactly what were your findings with regards to Huruma? Could you help us with that?
Yeah, if you're using the atlas, then you would use the grid cell, which is on the front page of the atlas book, which is the overview map of the book. And then you could refer to the specific page expressed on that overview map. But when I did the analysis, that overview map hadn't been created yet. That was done at the end.
But if we go to the specific page, we would be able to see the destruction that you were able to identify. Is that right?
That is correct.
Good. So now let us take a look at the work you have done with respect to Kiamba in order to detect the burnings or destruction that occurred there. Your report is contained in KenyaMOJA.com 0092-1380. That is tab 3 of the prosecution bundle, Exhibit 50 to be specific. That's your report for Kiamba, isn't it?
Yes.
And in the report, you indicated that 123 buildings were destroyed, 93 definitely destroyed, and 30 possibly destroyed. Is that right?
Yes.
And when you did the analysis for Kiamba, did the OTP provide you with information as to the exact boundaries of Kiamba village? Did they give you information as to the exact boundaries of Kiamba village?
No.
What were you given to assist you in your work?
I believe initially I was given a coordinate expressed only as Kiamba, and so that essentially becomes became the center point of the analysis. The smallest area you can purchase when you purchase a satellite image is 25 square kilometers, so we simply create an area around the center point amounting to 25 square kilometers.
Thank you very much. So do I take it to mean that when you did the analysis, you did not know the exact boundaries of Kiamba village? Is that right?
That's correct, and I would be surprised if there were actual administrative boundaries of a village, but that's speculation.
So when you arrived at this finding of 93 definitely destroyed houses, you merely counted the destroyed structure within the area that you analyzed. Is that right?
Yes.
But do you realize, let's perhaps go to the image of Kiamba. It's at 1386 of the document I referred to earlier, tab 8 of the prosecution bundle. Could you kindly put it up the screen, please? It's Ken OTP 0092 1386. Yes, it is already on the screen. So, do you realize, Mr. Bromley, that the red dots to the left bottom of the imagery are not in fact in Kiamba? Do you know that?
No.
And do you also realize that the red dots on the bottom right-hand corner of the image are also not in Kiamba? Do you realize that?
No, I wouldn't know that.
We in fact say that the place on the bottom right corner of the image is in fact in Cheplaskei, which is a Kalenjin village. What do you say to that?
Again, the analysis was just, it's an arbitrary 25 square kilometers around the coordinates I was given. That's the minimum area of a satellite image which you can purchase. It could have been larger, but it generally wouldn't have been smaller unless I was instructed to focus on a specific location.
For the record, Your Honor, Cheplaskei is CHEPLASKEI. And, Your Honors, may I refer the court to the defense bundle, tab 11. The defense bundle, tab 11, it's KEN D09 0034 0009. I do not propose to put it up the screen because I want the possibility of a comparison between this document and what is on the screen at the moment. Have you seen the document, Mr. Witness?
I beg your pardon, Your Honours, if I may, for a moment. The image which I've been provided looks like it was taken at night. I don't know whether the witness has the same image, But I have a better copy, and if the witness is going to be asked to comment on it, may I ask that this copy also be put before him? It's the same ERN 00340010.
I think a better copy is always welcome, but you may be looking at the wrong document.
I beg your pardon, which? You said tab?
Yes, my learned friend is referring to the document next in the series.
Tab 11.
We haven't quite get there yet,
beg
but
your
we'll
pardon.
be happy to receive your assistance once we get there. Please,
Mr. Fowl, is it not possible to know if you loaded up yours? Because the one I have is on the bundle. It looks washed out. Is it? If
we had a problem with the color printer this morning.
yes,
So
so if there's a better image, is it possible to flip back and forth? And then if you want to dwell on one image,
I'm guided, Mr. President.
Yes.
Could we load the document up the screen, please?
Your Honours, if I may assist, I also have a better copy of that one, which may be handed to the witness.
that would be greatly welcome.
Could we load it up the screen, please? KEN D09 0034 0009. Mr. Witness, can you see the document, please? It's a bit faint from looking at it from here, but can you see it clearly?
Yes.
And do you notice that the location of KenyaMOJA Church has been identified?
Yes, we should discuss this a little bit because what you've done is used Google Maps, and I would have no way of, we have no way of knowing if that's the accurate location of the church. If I input the coordinates that are in the URL, the web address at the top of your page, into my GIS, then it takes us to a location which is a farm field. So we go through this a lot when we use mapping resources about whether the coordinates of an area like this are actually accurate. But yes, on the map you've printed, there is a location called KenyaMOJA Church.
And but you would agree with me that this is the same general location that is depicted in KenOTP 0092-1386. That is the image you have looked at contained in tab 8. Would you agree?
It's certainly the same general location, but whether the location indicated for KenyaMOJA Church is the precise one, I can't say just sitting here very quickly.
That is not my issue for the time being. I just want to take you to some parts of this document, and we see where they fall. Kindly take, if you look at the image, you would see just below KenyaMOJA a collection of fields which appear in the form of a square, not perfectly, but in the form of a square. Could you see it? Just below KenyaMOJA.
Are we on tab 11 or tab 12?
Tab 11.
I see an empty area below KenyaMOJA Church, but on a map like this, you don't see whether they're fields or not.
Could you go back to the imagery you looked at and tell us whether you can see the same or a similar feature just below KenyaMOJA? Can you say it?
Which map are you telling him to look at now?
The imagery that he provided. Yes.
His own?
Yes, his own. Tab 8.
I see fields, but you see fields everywhere.
Mr. Bromley, what I am trying to refer to is this field that appears like a square below KenyaMOJA. You can see that, can't you? It's quite visible, isn't it?
On your map? On the Google map?
On both, actually.
On both Google Map and on my image?
Yes. Look at the middle section of your image.
Again, Mr. Fowl, where is his image? Did you say tab 8?
Tab 8 at page 1386.
Your Honours, I believe it's tab 7.
This is all right. Tab 3. I am sorry, Mr. President. It must be tab 3 of the prosecution binder.
Tab 3?
Yes.
It's neither 8 nor 7, so 3.
Tab 3. My apologies. It was arranged differently in my binder. My apologies.
Message from the interpreters. Could counsel kindly be asked to move his microphone to point it in his direction and also to switch it off when the witness is speaking, because it's picking up a lot of extraneous noise and making it difficult for the interpreters to interpret. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have you found it, Mr. President? The relevant...
Monsieur Fall, excusez-moi de vous interrompre, les interprètes.
Please, could I interrupt you? The interpreters are complaining about the noise around your microphone. If you could please switch it off when you're not using it. Thank you.
Thank you. My apologies once again. Mr. President, are you able to find the right document?
1386, yes.
I'm sorry, Your Honour, there really is a very loud background noise. The microphone has to be pointed towards the speaker. We really can't hear him properly.
Can you hear me now?
There seems to be a terrible hum on. We're not exactly sure what the source of the hum is.
All right. We don't know why. It could be because of, we know that when you made that observation the last time, it was only Mr. Fowl's microphone that was on and the witness's microphones that were on. But bear with us. Let's see.
Perhaps I can change microphones and see whether that will solve the problem. Can you hear me now?
We can certainly hear you. It's just that we hear a lot of background noise and we're not quite sure why. But let's try and proceed.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, I take it you have seen the relevant document that is at page 1386 of the prosecution document.
Yes.
Mr. Bromley, I was referring to the middle section of the imagery that you provided on page 1386. Can you say it?
Which tab?
It's tab 3 of the prosecution binder. It's the document that was previously put on the screen. Still on the report on KenyaMOJA.
Yeah.
Do you see it now?
Yes, and so the field areas between the roads, essentially, correct?
In the middle of the document. Can you say it?
Yes. Just so you know, the Google Map data that you've printed here is different than what's on my map, simply because my map was made a year ago, more than a year ago, and the Google map data has been updated since then.
I think what Mr. Fowl is saying is that if you looked at the Google map between Kiamba Church and St. Theresa's Hakima Primary, there is a space there that appears identical to what also appears on your own map at 1386. Can you see?
Yes, sir. Again, they're not entirely identical. There's more roads on the updated Google Map version than on my version.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. But Mr. Bromley, that aside, this is showing the same location. Is that correct?
Yes.
And if you are we are now to juxtapose this Google map we provided, or rather to overlay this Google map we have provided onto the image that you have, then you would see that the red dots on the bottom right-hand corner of your image would correspond to the area near Cheplas K Secondary School in the Google map. Is that right?
Correct.
You would also notice that the red dots on the left-hand corner would also correspond to the area of Patricia Primary School, Kabongo. Is that right?
On the bottom left of my map?
Yes. Would correspond to the area near Patricia Primary School, Kabongo.
I think it's below and left of the area of the Patricia Primary School.
Precisely.
Yes.
And do you know that Kabongo is a village near Kiamba and it's not part of Kiamba? Do you know that?
No.
And do you know that Kabongo is in fact a Kalenjin village?
No.
And back to Cheplas K, you don't know that Cheplas K is a Kalenjin village, do you?
No, sir.
In essence, Mr. Witness, we are saying that these red dots in the lower half of the image you provided are in fact in Kalenjin villages.
I wouldn't know.
Thank you very much. I won't burden you further with that particular issue.
Before you move away, Mr. Witness, on the Google map, we see Eldoret Nakuru Road. Do you see that?
Yes.
Are we able to see that road on your own map at 1386?
That would most likely be the yellow line on my map, on the 1386 map. But I would have to check my original data and verify that.
Thank you. Mr. Fowl, you can ask any follow-up question arising from mine.
I'll just leave that point and move on, Mr. President. You have adequately covered it. Mr. Witness, I now take you to Kimumu. When you did the grid, you identified those locations, in particular Kimumu, Huruma, Yamumbi, and Langas. Do you remember that?
Yes.
In fact, Ken OTP 0092 1067 shows Huruma. Can you put that document up the screen, please? Ken OTP 0092 1067.
Do we have a tab?
Yes. It's tab 10 of the OTP binder, the annotated report. And if you look at the top middle part of the document, you would see the typing Huruma. Can you see it?
Yes.
And this is the place you have identified in your report as Huruma, right?
Yes, based on the coordinates I was given.
Now, let's look at...
Mr. Farr, where is the Huruma?
If you look at the top half, the topmost part in the middle of the image.
I see it now. It's, again, washed out on the bundle, but I see it on the screen. Yes, okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would now take you to the one with the marking Kimumu, and it is on 0958 of the same document. Sorry, 0985 of the same document. Could you kindly put up the screen, Ken OTP 0092 0985. And if you look at the middle of the page, you would see the typing Kimumu in the middle of the page. Can you see it?
Yes.
Mr. President, are we together?
I can see it, yes, Kimumu.
Thank you very much. And you would agree with me that this is the place you have identified as Kimumu. Is that right?
Yes, based on the coordinates I was given.
In fact, we have seen various sections of this image previously, but we would come to that a bit later. Now let me take you to Yamumbi. Yamumbi would be 1132 of the same document. Can you take us to image to Ken OTP 0092 1132? could you see that in the topmost part, in the middle segment of the document, the typing Yamumbi? Can you see that?
Yes, in the adjoining grid cell.
And this is the location you identified as Yamumbi. Is that right?
Yes, again, based on the coordinates I was given by OTP.
Now let's go to the last location.
Mr. Farr, before we do, is there any slide or plate that shows Yamumbi as the center of attention? Here we see it outside, more or less on the outside on the edge.
We would come back to that. It was part of the planned evidence to be elicited from this witness. Thank you, Mr. President. So now let's move on to Langas. And Langas would be contained in 0092 1134 of the document, just 2 pages after Yamumbi. And Mr. Witness, could you take a look at the middle part of the report? You identified or you've typed Langas in the middle part of that document. Is that right?
Correct.
And this is the place you have identified as Langas. Is that right?
Yes, based on the coordinates I was given.
Were the coordinates given to you, or did you yourself acquire it by research? If the name of the location was given, then you found out what the coordinates were.
The coordinates were given to me and then also communicated in the request letter from the OTP.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And now that we have seen the annotated atlas of the various locations, we take it that you have examined the imagery on these locations and have identified the destruction and burning of structures that you notice in those documents, correct?
Correct.
Now let us examine the results of your analysis with respect to each of these particular areas. And let's start with Kimumu. And can we go back to 0092 0985? It is now up the screen. Can you see it?
Yes.
And you would agree with me that we have looked at this image on several occasions during the course of your testimony. It's that junction that, you talked extensively about with the prosecution. Do you remember it?
Yes.
And you agree with me that it shows some definitely destroyed structures on the right-hand side of the V, of the Y rather, on the right-hand side of the Y. Do you agree?
Yes, as well as one on the left.
This is the extent of the destruction you were able to see in the place you call Kimumu, right?
Yes, depending on how big the Kimumu area is, if it has boundaries. But yes, those are the points closest to the point I was given as Kimumu.
And
in that grade we see, would it be the case that if there were any other definitely destroyed, you would have identified them as well on the grade we're looking at now?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And looking at this document, we are talking about approximately 25 destroyed structures, correct?
Approximately, yes.
And Mr. Witness, we say that in fact the places that have been identified as destroyed are in fact in Beta Farm and not in Kimumu. What do you say to that?
I wouldn't know where the farm is or...
But Mr. Witness, you would agree with me that in such an analysis it is important for one to know the geography of the area, to know which village is located where.
That's argumentative now. The witness has answered.
I wanted his opinion on that, Mr. President. He may agree or disagree, but if you overrule me, I'll proceed.
It's overruled. Ask another question.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Try not to make it argumentative.
I'm guided, Mr. President.
You can reformulate that question. It's not the substance that's the trouble, it is the argumentative form of it.
I'm guided, Mr. President. Mr. Bromley, don't get me wrong here. We place no blame on you, none whatsoever. I just thought that this exercise would have been more meaningful if you were given precise locations. Wouldn't that have helped you?
When doing an image analysis like this, you almost don't want to contaminate your process by gathering too much other information. You essentially take a broad view across the area and assess each portion of the area separately. Whether something falls in one district or another district or within a farm or not a farm, it shouldn't influence the final results of the analysis, which is based on each individual structure. So what I'm doing when I do this is assessing the status of each individual structure, regardless of where it might fall within a property ownership schema or political district or anything like that.
But I take it, Mr. Witness, that your brief was also to identify destroyed structures within particular locations. Is that right?
Not beyond what was communicated in the letter from the OTP, which was the 4 coordinates, and I believe they said in the area of, and so I interpreted that to essentially mean a broad search. Some of that may have been my own experience on these, on mapping in many parts of the world, which is simply not precise. A location may be, kilometers away from the coordinates which have been provided, so you generally try and search an area without focusing too much on the precise coordinates. You'll notice the KenyaMOJA coordinate, as it appears on this map, appears to be on a fence. So if I was simply going to assess the fence, it is meaningless. And so, yeah, essentially we tend to search the areas around a coordinate as much as we can afford when we purchase the image.
So you blame it on the coordinates that you were provided. Is that right?
No, it's common practice to, first of all, you can't purchase an image for a single point. It's too small. The minimum I could have done is a 25 square kilometer area around that point. Since we had 4 points in this area, I expanded it to cover all 4 points. But yeah, I did not focus only on the specific coordinates communicated to me. Rather, I focused on the area around it.
Thank you very much. I'll move on.
But the coordinates would necessarily have been the center of attention, isn't it? So you have your coordinate, you identify it, and then you look around it, isn't it? Or did you do something different?
The coordinates are the center of the area of the image that you acquire, and you analyze the entire image. Or, to be precise, in this case, they were not necessarily the center of the entire image, but they determined the area of the image that I purchased.
Thank you very much. Mr. Witness, we say that the areas on the top right-hand side of the road of the image you're looking at is in fact not in KenyaMOJA. It is in a village called Marura. What do you say to that?
I have no information on that.
And
Mr. Fowl, now that we have the image, are you able to tell us where it is you say is Marura? Rather than talk about it in those general terms.
Yes, Mr. President. The next thing I was going to do is to put up the screen a map that would show some of these locations.
But are you able to do that on what we're looking at now?
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to do. Thank you, Mr. President. May I ask that document KEN D090034-001 be put up the screen, please? Tab 2 of Defense Bundle. Mr. Witness, this is a Google search result of the place called KenyaMOJA, and this is the result that came out. Would you agree that this image depicts the same location as that one contained in 0985, the OTP document you showed a moment ago?
Yes, the center of this map is that map, in addition to probably the grid squares next door.
And you would see that there is a shaded area colored brown in the middle of the document. Can you see that?
Yes, and
Mr. Farr, can you, if there is an identifying inscription, you might as well put it in so we can zero in on what you're talking about instead of shaded area brown.
I see a brown and a red.
You see, there is a shaded area which places identified such as Kimumu Primary School, Kimumu School, Kimumu Cathedral, PGC Church, Kimumu. Have you seen that in the document?
Yes.
And we say that this shaded area is in fact the area known as Kimumu. What do you say to that?
I wouldn't have any other information on that.
And if you were to overlay this image over the image that you have provided in 0985, you would see that the burnt area that you have identified is in fact not within the shaded area that shows Kimumu. Is that right?
The particular burned area we looked at would not appear to be there, but the other burned areas would.
Mr. Fowl, can you look at that again? We see on one side PGC Church Kimumu. We see Kimumu Sisters Convent. We see St. Catherine's Kimumu Primary School. And we also see Better Farm where it is on your map.
Yes, Mr. President. I take particular note to the issue of Better Farm. And I think at the appropriate time, we may have to call evidence to show exactly where is Better Farm, because that has become an issue. I also take note of the fact that there are 1 or 2 points in the burned area that may appear within what is the shaded area we call Kimumu. I would deal with that particular issue right away. And if you look at the Google map that we have provided, you would see the place called Kimumu Sisters Convent. And you would realize that it coincides with what appears to look like an H in the image that you provided, just where Kimumu is written on your map. Can you say it?
It's tough to see on what I have.
Look at document 0985.
Of 0092?
Yes. Mr. Bromley, I am referring to B12, if that helps. B12.
Okay.
Just look at where the inscription is Kimumu, in the middle of the page.
Okay.
Could you see a feature there looking like a letter H
You mean roads?
Yes,
To the left or the right, or
to the right of the document, just after the U in Kimumu. Could you see it?
an H horizontal or vertical?
It is horizontal.
Ah, yes, I believe I see it.
Mr. Fowler, I want to follow you. Where are we?
If you look at the middle of the image,
Again, time. Sorry, the page is
0985,
Yes.
B12 to be specific.
Where are we put? All right.
B12.
Yes.
And if you look at the middle, you would see the writing Kimumu.
That I see, yes.
Yes, just immediately after the U, there is what may appear like a letter H, but it's just a road, really, looking like a letter. Immediately after the U, you could see that those roads and the field. Yes, that location.
You mean a lowercase h?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Bromley. And if you look at that place, it looks like it coincides with the place called Kimumu Sisters Convent, or thereabout.
It's possible, unless there is another road to the south that looks like an H.
Well, wouldn't that depend on the scale of your
Exactly.
Google map?
Yes, yes. But what I am trying to do here, Mr. President, is trying to be as fair to the witness as possible, because there are few dots in that area, in his map, which, if the scales were to be exactly the same, may show some burning in the place we call Kimumu. I just want to be fair to him and not exclude everything that is on this, that appears to be in better form.
Yes, of course, from the bench, it's always touch and go how far we press in when counsel are cross-examining. And the reason I brought up the matter of the scale is if what you're looking at is the Kimumu Sisters Convent that appears on your Google map. Can correct me if I'm wrong, but you're here to assist us see the evidence and your point. It would appear, considering the scale, that it appears the scale on Mr. Bromley's own map might be larger. Maybe your own H could be further down the line on his map. Am I?
I agree with you entirely, Mr. President, on that. Mr. Bromley, if...
But then is here he's had the exchange, he can help us see if I'm on the wrong track or Mr. Fowl is on...
I mean, again, it's the scale. It's hard to tell. The Sisters Convent seems very far down the road, whereas the H you refer to is almost at the intersection of the Y on my map.
I mean...
That's the point I was getting at. We can clear it up now rather than argue about it later.
That's right. But, Mr. Bromley, you know these things better than I do, certainly. And you have seen the map that we have provided. You have seen the Google image. You know scales much more than I do. Would you say, based on your experience, that the dots, the red dots that you find in what appears to be letter H, small case, on the map you provided, would those dots fall within the shaded area called Kimumu in the Google map we have provided?
Okay, if we look at the Google map, there's a shaded area up next to St. Catherine Kimumu Primary School. That area, I believe, is the area indicated on my map, the 0985. And the red dots, my definitely destroyed structures, are up in that area next to St. Catherine Kimumu Primary School. If you look under the text of St. Catherine Kimumu Primary School, it's extremely hard to see, but I believe there is a road shaped like a lowercase h there as well. I would think that that is the lowercase h road on the B12 map, but honestly I think the Kimumu Sisters Convent area is farther south. But again, it would require some indication of the scale on your Google map.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bromley. And therefore, if what is contained in the shaded area of the Google map we provided is Kimumu, then it means to say that all the red dots that are contained in your map would be outside the area called Kimumu. Is that right?
Again, I think there's the shaded area up near the intersection marked as Children Playfield, St. Catherine Kimumu Primary School. I believe most of my red dots are within that area. The shaded area below that, down the page, on this particular grid cell that you're looking at, I don't know if there's red dots there, but I think on the broader data set you would find other destroyed and possibly destroyed structures in that area. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. But taking at its best, it would appear that these 25 red dots is the extent of the destruction in the area you call Kimumu. Is that right?
I didn't denote an area called Kimumu beyond the point that I was given by the OTP.
Well, precisely. That is the issue. The area that you were given as Kimumu, this is the extent of the destruction you have seen. Nothing further.
Your Honor, I should object at this stage. The witness has stated repeatedly he was not given an area. He was given a point. The point is described on the mandate as a central point of those areas. So he has no information about what the limits of the areas are. And what my learned friend repeatedly is putting to him that he was given an area. That's simply not correct.
Mr. President,
so the point is coordinates. It was given coordinates.
Yes, exactly. But the coordinates were also tied to a particular geographical area, in this instance called Kimumu. This is the extent of the destruction that you find in the with regards to the coordinates that you have examined, the area called Kimumu. This is the extent of the destruction that you have found. Is that right?
On examining my other maps, I would say no. There's additional destruction which would certainly fall within the area you're describing as Kimumu based on the Google map.
Could you show them to us?
That would be on OTP 00920957, the large A3 map. If you follow the road C48 to the south, you have plenty of additional destroyed points down there.
Did you identify those locations as Kimumu?
No, did not identify any location as Kimumu. I just used the Kimumu coordinate which I was given.
But Mr. Witness, we have looked at the Google image of the area represented as Kimumu. And if you look at that, if you overlay that to the map you have provided, there are hardly any red dots there. Is that right?
I would have to overlay your map with my map and look at it. I mean, just looking at it from here, I would think you would see multiple dots, but we also can't see how far south the Kimumu area goes in your map. It looks like it may go on for quite some time, but that's speculation.
And in order to avoid speculation, taking it at its best, the evidence that you have provided, in 0985, there are no more than approximately 25 destroyed structures on this map. Is that right?
Mr. Fowl, the witness has referred you to 0957.
Yes.
And that is a fair question to take in there, shouldn't it?
But, Mr. President, the witness did a grid-by-grid analysis of what is contained in 0957. So 0957 is a document that is difficult to read without any further assistance.
Yes.
And that is why the grid cells are important. I have referred him to the grid cell that he labeled Kimumu. If there are any other grid cells which fall within that particular area of Kimumu, then perhaps it's for him to source.
And that's a fair point. You say yes, 0957, it's difficult to read on its own, but to an extent, perhaps we can begin with asking the witness that looking at 0957, if one looks at it, and you bring in your question, does it show the extent of the destruction that he was able to have identified in his task? And then, first we settled that, so if he tells us that, then we will start looking at zeroing in on particular subdivisions, magnified subdivisions, into which 0957 may be split.
The difficulty I have with that, Mr. President, is we believe that those other areas are outside the Kimumu town. And perhaps maybe it's because of the understanding we have of the geographic area, because we've been to the place. We believe that Kimumu is covered in what we have provided.
Well, let's do this. Let him answer my question, and then let's make that mine.
Thank you very much.
Witness, you heard my concern, or rather what I was discussing with Mr. Fowl. If we look at 0957, which you referred to, would you say that he would have, at that level of abstraction, have accounted for every destruction you would have seen within the grid appearing there, the red outline we see?
Yes, and I was using 0957 because it requires less page turning, but if we go into the atlas, the heading south along that road, then you get to sheet C12, which does show several of the locations indicated in the Google map. And again, there are both destroyed and possibly destroyed structures on C12. And then I guess we would go down to D12, depending on how far south we want to go.
So the 0957 is more or less a comprehensive picture of the whole thing.
Yes, but if we want to use the atlas to stay within what he asked, then we would go to C12 and then D12, and possibly farther, but I don't know how far south the Kamumu area goes. And both C12 and D12 would show many of the Kamumu locations indicated on the Google map and additional destroyed points around them.
All right, so we're clear. C12 and D12 are also represented in 0957. Or are they outside of 0957?
They're in 0957 and then also in the 0092 1000 page of the atlas, and then 0092 1015 page.
All right. My next question to you then is this. Looking at 0957, would it be accurate to say that if there were any destructions to the extent that the satellite images you acquired were able to show, you would have accounted for them in 0957?
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Witness, I would take you to C12 and D12 so that we can also see the extent of the destruction, just so that we can cover all the area you think would also be Kimumu. Let's go to C12, please.
Where is it?
Tab 10, C12, which is 0092-1000. Could you load that up the screen, please?
Before you start your questions on C12, and I'm not stopping you, Mr. Bromley, again, to be clear, so to allow us, the judges, follow you. What we see at 0957, is it what is represented on the top right-hand corner of C12?
Yes, the points are the same data, and then the background satellite image is different. So in C12, the image used is the image from January 2008.
What I'm trying to understand, so we can correlate one thing to the other. So 0957 is a larger representation of a smaller image we see on the top right-hand corner of C12.
Correct.
Thank you.
And Mr. Witness, if you take a look at C12, you would see that there are some red dots, right?
Correct.
And let us count them. I have counted about 12 dots. Do you agree?
Yes. And then we also see in the middle of C12 what I think is the Kumumu Cathedral. So I think we're all looking at the same spot then.
Yes. Let us now move to D12. It's on 0092-1015. Could you see it?
Yes.
And I have counted about 16 destroyed structures, according to your report.
Approximately, yes.
So now we are talking about 15 plus 16, that's 31, plus 25 in the previous map that we have seen to make it 26 destroyed structures. Sorry, 56 destroyed structures.
I'll trust your math, yes.
And let's pause there for a minute. Interpreters, how is it going with the rifling? Is it still very disturbing, or has it sort of somewhat ameliorated?
Your Honour, there's no background noise now. Thank you.
Mr. President, perhaps this is a convenient time to stop for a break.
All right, we will take our morning break now and we'll come back at 11:30. How much longer do you think you will stay?
Mr. President, I want to do this exercise for the rest of the villages. So I still have Langas, Yamumbi, and Huruma to do. Huruma looks very easy. Yamumbi and Langas a bit more here. So I should finish before lunch break. Thank you.
We will take our morning break now. Call to rise.
All rise. We will